now. Let's give a few seconds to get these streams kicked off because I know last time me and Lou did a live Q&A, a lot of you wanted to sort of see that real time, real feed with the questions coming in live on YouTube. And my hope, Lou, is that we are live around about now. So first question, how are you feeling since what happened on Wednesday as we start this live stream before the questions start coming through? Give us a little bit of an oversight of what happened on Wednesday and how did it feel for you?
So Wednesday is first of all, forgive me if I got bags under my eyes and I look like I just got run over by a train. I haven't had much sleep probably in quite some time. So for any member out there in the audience, please forgive me. I know I look like something that the cat probably choked up on your on your carpet in your living room. So um, I think that the hearing was 7 years in the making. I think it was to a degree historic. It was a continuation of a hearing that occurred about a year ago with one of my colleagues, David Grush, and also some other individuals who testified, Ryan Graves, and of course we had Dave Fravor, all of them American patriots and American heroes. And I was very bothered after within 24 hours of the first hearing, there was this insidious attack on Dave Grush's reputation and credibility. And I found it disgusting and reprehensible. Um, I know what he went through. I had the honor and privilege to work with side by side with David Grush at U.S. Space Force. I won't say which particular office on the UAP topic. And Dave is everything he says he is. And let me put this for any veteran out there. There was a time our country didn't recognize PTSD, and we had terrible suicide rates. Veterans were suffering, men and women in uniform, silently. It was a silent killer. And we learned that that's not a way to deal with PTSD, that we owe it to our men and women in uniform to provide services. If you ask them to go fight in a war where there's violence and death and destruction, these people come back and they need a way to deal with it. And so we've set up these mechanisms to allow us to deal with it. And what do they do to my good friend Dave Grush? Well, they actually use the very mechanism that we have been told to use to deal with PTSD, and they use it against him. So you had an internal leak of some of his medical records from a three-letter agency, and it was abhorrent and it was unfair. And those individuals who did that, I don't consider them American heroes at all or patriots. I consider them the lowest of the low because Dave did exactly what he was supposed to do, and he wanted to get some assistance for PTSD. This is a guy who's been in combat, and what does he get in return for serving his country and doing the right thing? Um, Baseless attacks on his credibility, somehow trying to label him as either crazy or something like that. Let me tell you, for the record, David is not crazy. He's probably one of the most sane, rational people that I know, and he's also brilliant. He's highly intelligent. In fact, I hate to be in the same room with him because the moment I walk in, the IQ points drop about 20 points, um, the average IQ point. So he's an American hero, and so this I was hoping. Back to your question, I'm hoping that this hearing is a continuation of something that my good friends that were on the stand last year um, did. And furthermore, I think it's a tremendous acknowledgement to our Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, that we can come together as a nation. And look, it takes a lot of courage as a politician to attack a topic like this that is fraught with stigma and all these proverbial landmines, right? It's not good for your political career to go chasing UFOs. And yet, there is overwhelming evidence of a government cover up. And I think it's wrong, and I think our members of Congress realize it's wrong. Folks like Congresswoman Luna and Congresswoman Mace, and some of the other members of Congress there, like Burchett and Eric Burleson, fantastic people to have. These are highly intelligent people, and they're also American patriots, and they want to see change, positive change in our country. And so I think us, the people, need to support that. We need to let them know once in a while, hey, this is really appreciated. This is exactly what we want our elected officials to do. We want you to pursue truth and transparency to the maximum ability possible. And that is exactly what they're doing. Um, to some degree, it actually restores my faith in the system. This huge, wonderful experiment we call democracy in America has had, in some cases, a checkered history. And what makes us great is not that we don't make mistakes. What makes us great is that when we make mistakes, we learn from those mistakes and we don't do those mistakes again, right? And that is what I think makes our country so wonderful. And I saw that myself there, sitting beside people like Admiral Gallaudet and Mike Gold from NASA and Schellenberger. You had a wide variety of people that were testifying from different backgrounds with different perspectives. And that is exactly what a democracy is. That is the very definition of democracy. So I don't want to spend too much time. I know people have got a lot of questions, but I was very encouraged. I was also exhausted, right? You're testifying before the American people in Congress under oath, which, by the way, has a criminal penalty if you lie. So you've got to be very, very accurate. But at the same time, I've got a security oath, and there were things that I know and that I've been told that I can't repeat. Oh, forgive me, my microphone here is
Yeah, you're all
decided
good.
to have a mind of its own. So give me a second here as I try to figure out this thing.
Well, you know what?
Um,
Technical malfunctions are always going to happen live. So you take your time and you get
you know
your
what? I'm going
mic
to blame the
rolling.
CIA for this. Darn it, they
Yeah.
did this to me. No, I'm kidding.
Someone's sabotaging you in real time, huh?
That's right. It starts sabotaging my microphone, so
Well,
I
look,
can't have this conversation with you. No, we're good now. Thank you,
good,
folks out there, for your patience.
good.
I was kidding, by the way, for the record. Obviously, this is not sabotage. It's just,
All right.
I
Well,
didn't do a
Lou,
good job installing it.
if I can do my best now, because you have hundreds, if not thousands, of questions coming through already, because trying to
Wow.
understand your perspective and what it must be like testifying like that, you bring up some very good
Yeah.
points about the very real penalties that exist for people that are being untruthful. So, on that note, I am watching your questions live. Lou, I'll try and speak slowly so you can get these questions because there's a lot of them. A couple of quick shout outs. Rocky Woo, because you were first on here. I see Monkey Boy, hi. Robert Sharma is in. Bite My Bait's there. We've got tons. Gregory Leave saying hi. We've got Luchin from South Africa. We've got Pam Harris. There are people tuning in all around the world. Salute to Lou from Luchin. There's people from Montreal. Hey, Jacob, we see you. Jeff is saying you killed it on Wednesday. Lots of people saying well done on the hearing. Just tons and tons. Hi from Greece and Nikos, we see you. Hi from the UK from Robbo. Okay, so let's begin with a bit of a generalized question. I'm going to join a few of your questions up here, and obviously I'm trying to do this live.
You know
One,
what? Before you ask a question, Mark, let me just say a big thank you to you as well.
oh, you're
We've
too
done this
kind.
now a few times. You've been an absolute scholar and a gentleman. You're not, let me just for the record so everybody knows, you're not getting paid to do this. You're just doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You run a very successful business. You don't need to be spending time doing this, and you're volunteering your time and your effort and your talent to bring this information forward. So let me just take just a real brief moment here for all our audience out there. Mark, his background is physics, and he is a very successful businessman in London. It's to protect his privacy. If he wants to talk about it, he certainly can, but I won't. But really, thank you, Mark, from the bottom of my heart and everybody else for doing this because it is truly, truly appreciated, and we know you don't have to do it, and maybe sometimes you don't want to do it, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Look, Lou, it's an honor, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many of you in the comments right now because I love to do this because I'm very interested in that transparency and honesty, and lots of us are just trying to understand the truth, and we look at you as someone who is an advocate for that truth. And on that note, here is a common comment that's coming across all of your social channels right now, which is to say, you acknowledged seemingly and publicly said that the US government have a UAP retrieval program. You said that under oath. How did that feel?
Yeah, well, scary as hell. Look, I made it very clear in my testimony. I signed documentation that forbade me from ever discussing the term crash retrievals under penalty of law, right? Very strict law. And in order to have the conversation in my testimony, it took me several years to be able to include some of that information in the draft copy of my book that went to DOPSR for review. That's the only reason why I was able to even mention and talk about crash retrievals, because I was told I never could. And so I knew I'd have to go through some sort of legal process if I was going to add any value to the conversation. And so I think maybe some people misinterpreted when I was having the conversation. I mentioned DOPSR in my book. I wasn't plugging my book. That was never my intention. I was trying to explain to people the natural question, which you're asking me now. Well, Lou, if you said you signed a document, you can't talk about crash retrievals, and yet in your opening statement you're talking about crash retrievals, why aren't you going to jail? Well, it's because since I signed that document, I went through the official DOPSR review process, so I could talk a little bit about it. But then they reminded me, and very sternly, um, that I had to stick to that. I could not talk beyond what I was already approved to talk about through DOPSR. And so that's it's kind of when I talk about having to thread the needle and always having to watch where that third rail is. I have no problem walking up to the line and really close to the line, but I have to be careful I can't cross over the line.
That makes
Because then
sense.
what happens is that I get into trouble, and then I potentially go to jail and I get silenced, and then I can't have a conversation with people, right? And so this is where it goes back to a long time ago, where I say there's a difference between doing things right and doing things right now. It took me some time to do it right, but I think we did it right. Now we've got lot more to go, 100,000%. But I think this testimony was a good milestone. And keep in mind, incrementally, the more ground you take, the less ground you lose. And so that's why I did what I did and what I said. I was very impressed by the individual sitting next to me. Honestly, I felt terrible when I left that hearing. I thought I did the worst of everybody. I felt guilty. I apologize to each and every one of them. I said, I wish I could have contributed as much as you. It was my honor and privilege to be standing and sitting in some cases next to some of these individuals, all these individuals who put everything out on the line. Were very direct, very forthcoming. And again, back to the members of Congress and ultimately everybody who was watching it. Mace, Representative Mace said she has never been in a hearing before in Congress where at the end there was a standing ovation. Think about that. Now, they weren't applauding me. They weren't applauding the folks next to me. They were applauding Congress. They were applauding Congress for finally taking this head on. Did you hear the opening statements of some of these folks? There's a two-letter word that I'm not going to discuss here, but most people know what it is. It starts with an I, and the other word starts with a C. Um, they were bullish about it. They didn't care. They said, "Look, I'm going to say it anyways. I'm a member of Congress, by golly. This is a democracy, and if I get put on some list, well, you know, to hell with it. I'll be on a list." That takes guts, man. That takes bravado. That takes gumption. So that was tremendous to see, and I think the American people and maybe even the world should should recognize that because it took a lot for them to do that. It really, really did. The questions that Representative Luna, all of them, everybody asked was fantastic, and Boebert and everybody. So I was very pleased with it. I wish I could have provided even more information. We ran out of time. I do think we're going to have more of these. If I was a betting man, both maybe in the House and the Senate. But we're only going to have more if the people demand that they want this. If the people say, look, we want transparency, this is important to us, then they'll have more hearings. If people say, meh, whatever, then we won't.
It's a perfect time to jump over to Zentil Godin on YouTube right now. As a Brit, I'm not 100% sure on how your system works. So I'm going to just put a little bit of extra onto Zenti's question here. He says, or she says, or they say, is there a timeline for a Senate hearing? And I'd kind of like to understand how that progresses from where we were to what the importance of a Senate hearing would be.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So you can think, since you're in the UK, you can think of our two houses of government, our Senate and our House of Representatives, as very much as like the House of Lords versus the House of Commons. It is a checks and balance within our legislative um, structure to ensure that all voices are heard and all voices are represented. And so you can think of our Senate as being the House, like I said, House of Lords, the other one being House of Representatives. Um, that's probably the best way to describe it. One is not more important than the other. They just represent interests a little differently, and they also have different rules on what they can do and how they do things. So a Senate hearing is no more or no less important than a House hearing. There's just fewer members, um, but it is. I think it is indicative of the appetite that the American people have for truth and transparency and the will of some of our elected officials. Look, I'm not going to say who else I met while I was in D.C. behind closed doors, but I met with some of the most senior senators that we have and representatives in our government. And I got to tell you, these folks are willing to put their political proverbial lives, if you will, uh, on the line, politically speaking, right? They're willing to risk their re-elections and their campaigns to pursue this topic because now they realize there's something to it. There is something there. Information is being withheld, hidden from them. Case in point, if I can, um, the former director of Aero. I'm going to see if I can pull this statement up because I think it's actually very impactful.
And whilst you're pulling a few things up, Lou, couple more shout outs. We've got Martin Reeson is tuning in, Bo and YouTube, a bunch of people tuning in from Wales in the UK. Clipped Ryan, I see you. Jason Martin, I see you. I'm really going to try and get to as many of these questions as I can, but back over to you, Lou, for the moment.
Yeah, and I'm going to make this short, but look, the last former Aero director, people ask me all the time, well, what about you think this latest report that Aero released? What do you think? Well, first of all, that report was written before we had the new leadership in. It had been in draft for quite some time. The old leadership, if you remember, said publicly, "There's nothing to see here. It's balloons, all prosaic, nothing to see here." Let me just read here. See if I can find it here. There's a statement, recent statement. We can find it here. I'll pull it up in a minute, where the new director says of Aero, "Look, there's things here. I know physics. I've worked on some of the most advanced projects for the National Security Agency, and there are observations of some of these UAP that still defy our understanding of physics." I'm paraphrasing here, but it's really a complete 180 position from the former Aero director, which we know has over time, over and over again, said misleading and false things to Congress. There was that time he said, "No, I wasn't part of that meeting on the Hill in the Senate," and then of course there's a picture of him exactly in that meeting there on the Hill. For, you know, so I think Arrow has some work to do to regain some of the credibility. I am optimistic that that is occurring. I think we should give Arrow a chance to succeed. There are some very good people in that organization. So, with that, I will get off my pedestal and start answering questions. But I think it's important because people would say, "Well, Arrow lying to us." No, I think we got to understand that there's been a transition in leadership, and we've got to give this new leadership an opportunity to succeed. And already, some of the verbal comments being made, the statements, public statements, are complete 180 from the last leadership. So I'm very optimistic.
I'm going to jump onto one from Andrew McIntyre here. Again, this is a bit of a joining of multiple questions. I'll do my best here. But Andrew McIntyre says, "Can Lou tell Congress the names of the criminals to subpoena?" Now, I'm assuming that Andrew is also referring to the point in Wednesday when I think Congresswoman Mace was essentially asking, "Look, where do we go? Who do we go to? Where do we look next if you're in our position?" And I know that you were reluctant to necessarily put names out there.
Yeah.
What's your feeling and sentiment about that particular question?
Sure. Well, I did it for the privacy of individuals. Whether you like somebody or hate somebody, it doesn't matter. We have to protect people's privacy. And I just, here I just went on a tirade a little bit about the former Arrow leadership professionally, but personally, he doesn't deserve harassment. He doesn't deserve threats. We have to make a distinction between someone's professional persona and their personal persona. And I think if I were to just reveal names publicly like that, a lot of these individuals would start facing the same level of harassment, and that's not fair. We can't do that. I know people want their pound of flesh, so to speak, but we have to really handle this the right way. And the best case scenario is that you don't have to subpoena people; they'll just come up voluntarily under oath. But in other cases, you may have to subpoena them. And if you do, what you don't want to do is get these folks harassed before they even testify. So that's one of the reasons why I said what I said, because I don't want people's privacy and their health and their safety to be risked, especially if they have a family. It's We can't allow that to happen to anybody, whether you like them or not.
And makes complete sense. I know there's always a big drive, isn't there, for people like me and us in the comments. We just want to know, we want that truth. And I think you've always been, very measured in your approach in doing that the right way. Here's another good question. You know, Ben Boren, I see you. Steve Scripps, I see you. I'm reading all of these comments as they come through. You can imagine in my position, it is tricky when so many are coming. I'm going to try and join a few into one.
Have
Um,
to aggregate them a little bit so we can get them all.
exactly that. You've got it. But, Salvia, Apiana, I see you. Joe Hayden. Here's a good question, Lou. Is it the case that when you look at these NDAs, these reasons for you not to be able to disclose things, if they are inherently, let's say, illegal, if there are wrongdoings, does that not disqualify the NDA because your duty is to be a law-abiding citizen
Absolutely
and
not. You
expose
can
that?
still classify things. We do things all the time. I'm not going to go into detail here, but if you understand a little bit about Executive Order 12333 and Title 50 programs and covered action, DoD, what I can tell you is that we have clandestine operations, and the definition of that is basically conducting operations where you hide in some cases sponsorship. I'm sorry, you hide the activity, whereas covert action is a little different, where you're hiding in some cases sponsorship. You have plausible deniability, and yes, there's legal precedents where you know you're not really supposed to violate U.S. law, but you can violate international law if it's in the best interest of the U.S. national security, and other countries do the same thing. Um, and so there are times where it is authorized to deny the existence of something under certain circumstances to protect U.S. national security. Now, I'm not going to go into detail here, but that is something that is known by a lot of the folks on the intelligence committees and maybe the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House, House committees as well. But not everybody. If you haven't been in the world of intelligence, you may not necessarily know that. And so a lot of people believe, well, if something is illegal, then you can't classify it. Not necessarily true.
That's fascinating because there's still tons of questions coming through on that same point. So hopefully Lou's answered that. I am obviously in this
And I'm not a
live.
lawyer, by the way, so that's another reason why, right? We're very careful. Most folks that are involved in intelligence aren't necessarily lawyers, so we rely on lawyers to interpret the law for us.
Yeah, spot on. I am weighting most of my questions towards the hearing, of course, because that's what most of you are asking about here. But purely because of the number of times that ZPE disclosure is just machine gunning this question on and on and on in the chat. So I've got to ask you, and then ZP, if you wouldn't
Tenacious.
mind. Yeah, tenacious. So here you go. The tenacity is paid off here. I've got to ask this one. It's not necessarily about the hearing on Wednesday, but here we go. Lou, ZPE disclosure is asking, what do you know about 0 point energy and Hal Puthoff?
So Hal Puthoff is a colleague of mine. He was a giant in the intelligence community, has been part of pretty much all the spooky stuff that CIA and our intelligence community has been involved with for decades. He is considered the grandfather or godfather of the CIA's psychic espionage program known as now as Stargate. Before that, it was Grill Flame, and several iterations before that. And he was a principal member of both OSAP and our team at ATIP. And continues to provide great value. He's also a physicist, world renowned physicist, an incredible human being. And so having him on your team is like having an 800-pound gorilla with you when you're in a boxing match. Um, really, really, truly an American treasure. 0 point energy is a theory. Now, let me see if I can capture this correctly because I'm not the physicist that you are, Mark. But 0 point energy is the idea that there is a steady state of energy that exists in a complete vacuum of space. So a lot of people believe that energy in space, in the deepest, darkest parts of space, there really isn't anything. If you don't have mass moving around or anything like that, there really isn't any energy. And yet, scientists now have come to the conclusion that there indeed is potentially energy out there. Think of a field. Think of in some cases, the notion that little particles of matter and antimatter are constantly popping into existence, in empty space, and they annihilate each other very quickly. And there's energy in that release. So zero point energy, vacuum energy, is something that Hal has been a leading physicist on. I want to make sure I don't mischaracterize zero point energy, because I'm sure there's a lot of physicists out there that are saying, "Well, Lou, you don't have that exactly right," and I'm sure I don't. But the idea is that there is energy even in areas of the universe where it shouldn't be, and in fact, it's everywhere. And if you have a way to harness that, then you potentially have an unlimited supply of free energy, in theory. And Mark, please feel free to add to that, because you're probably more qualified than me.
You know what? I really wouldn't be. And your knowledge of physics is something that is really quite incredible. We've had many conversations between me and you, and I've always been blown away by the level of your understanding. And let's say that some of the theories that you have are quite incredible. I always thought of zero point energy similar in some way to what Hawking radiation might look like if you've got this sort of boiling ether of space and time where these particles are popping in and out of existence and annihilating afterwards. If you could separate them somehow, for example, like the event horizon of a black hole, you would kind of be able to remove, kind of absorb or input energy, essentially, I guess, from either another dimension or the universe itself somehow. So, yeah, I can't claim to have any further insight on that, but it's definitely a fascinating.
Yeah, you're referring to the entangled particles that may exist right at the event horizon, where one is just a little closer and falls into the event horizon, where the other gets ejected out through the gamma radiation, based upon what they refer to as the quasar. So you have this incredible hot ring of matter and gas orbiting around this event horizon. Right before it gets sucked in, it gets super super hot and so energetic that a beam of cosmic radiation is blasted out of the center of the poles, each side of the pole of the black hole. And so the idea is that sometimes when you have entangled particles, one gets sucked in while the other one gets ejected out. And that's a super really interesting concept as well too. But certainly I'm not qualified to really talk much about it.
I guess when it comes to these things, it's all about ideas, isn't it, and exploring the maths behind it. But it's a fascinating thing we could talk for days around. This next question is from Mystic. And by the way, quick shout out on the other stream. We've got multiple streams that are going out live across a couple of channels here. So JVW, we see you. William Ramsey, we see you. Wuzzy 450. So we see, I'm seeing everyone. I'm going to try and get through these questions as we go. Here's a great question for Mystic. How long did you work with David Grush, and how was your work connected? I guess this is also tipping the hat to the fact that you've both now testified. Tell us about your history with him.
Yeah, so I worked with David Grush when he had a lot of jobs. He was at times in military uniform, as an Air Force intelligence officer, and then other times our interactions was him as a civilian, a senior civilian with a three-letter agency. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what agency, but he can tell you. And because of his level of expertise, I will tell you, he'll probably get very mad at me for sharing this, but just to kind of emphasize how smart this guy is, um, we gave him the name Big Data because he had this incredible ability to crunch massive amounts of data in his head and very quickly synthesize it and process it and come out with a result. Um, he is also a physicist, and a very, very smart physicist, and he's also a very smart intelligence officer. And his insights were very helpful. My relationship with him was we worked in a skiff, in fact, actually, as a SAPF facility, for SAPs, where we managed certain aspects of the UAP effort for U.S. Space Force at the time, where we had access to a lot of the videos and hyperspectral data and telemetry data. And really, at that point, it becomes very compelling. Seeing is really believing. You have something there in front of you that's taken by a very sensitive military collection platform that we don't necessarily want to admit we even have, or that we can put it, over this place or that place. And so a lot of that stuff remains protected. It's not necessarily the video itself that is super highly classified. It's how that video was taken, where was it taken, how, what time was it taken. So that stuff remains very, very sensitive, and understandably so. So my involvement with Dave Grush was in that capacity. We were colleagues. We worked very close with each other on a daily basis. We talked to each other. We worked for some very, very senior people. We provided advice and assistance. I know that David was actually part of the UAP task force. He was that agency's representative to the UAP task force at the time, and we interacted with the UAP task force routinely. I don't know if I ever actually talked about that, but we interacted with the UAP task force and its personnel routinely.
Well, there we go. We're getting the exclusives here. This is the whole point of doing these lives. And for those of
That's
you
because
along
I'm
with the
tired. My
no,
guard is down.
no, it's great. We got. I mean, I'm looking at the concurrent viewers and the views here. It's just going through the thousands. So you got a hell of a lot of people wanting to check in on you, Lou. It's really cool to see. Next question I'm going to jump on to is Roland Gibbs. Roland is asking pretty straightforward question here. He says, considering the need for secrecy, why do you think you have been approved to reveal anything at all?
Well, it's because I've been making an issue of it because I understand policy and procedures. I understand I was a counterintelligence special agent and I understand the security processes and procedures for national security information. So if you want the truth to come out, there's a right way to do it. And so understanding those procedures is important. I don't not necessarily that I've been allowed to. I've just been insistent. And at the end of the day, there has to be a legal reason for them to say no. And so what does that mean? So you can't talk about X, Y, Z. Well, why? Well, because there's a security classification guidance that says you can't. Okay, well then tell me what I can. And then, the other more philosophical approach to this is when someone says, when I ask, well, can I talk about this? And they say, well, I don't have the authority to tell you yes. Well, then in my mind, you also don't have the authority to tell me no either. If you don't have the authority, you don't have the authority. So who does? I'll go to that person. Um, so a little bit of being, tenacious, not stopping, figuring out a way to have a conversation. If they say, well, you can't do it this way, okay, then fine. Then tell me how I can do it. Right? Don't just say no because that's not going to work. Because then at that point, you're talking about obfuscation, and I'm not gonna allow that. If there's real, truly national security reasons to keep things in the dark, I support that 100%. But if you're just doing it to cover your ass, then we're gonna have a problem.
It goes beautifully onto the next question. And before I ask this next question, something that I have found really interesting knowing you for a little while, Lou, is even in our personal conversations, there's only ever been so much you can talk about. And that has changed so much in just the time I've known you. Our first conversations were kind of very limited. And as time has gone on, as you've done, as you've walked this process carefully, it's amazing how much we can talk about now compared to where we were before, and God knows what happens in the years to come. So now on to Robert Sharma. Robert Sharma says, I have a very spongy question. But Robert, I actually think this is a pretty good question. It is a little spongy, but here we go. Out of all of the scenarios, how do you think the DoD or the US government would ideally continue after yet another amazing public hearing? So he kind of makes the point, if these hearings keep continuing and more people come forward, is there a point where the government just has to turn around and confirm that all of this is true?
Well, I think you're seeing that right now in the executive branch. I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of people right now that are about to fill cabinet positions that are very aware of this topic, and they want the truth too. So, before it was just kind of the legislative branch putting pressure on the executive branch, but now you've got support inside our executive branch too that is in line and consistent with the wants and the desires and the views of those in the legislative branch. So we're reaching a critical mass here. Now you have both sides kind of looking at each other, nodding their head and say, you know what, we gotta figure this out. So I think we're getting closer and closer and closer. If you look at, let's say, a football game, the ball is being moved closer and closer to the goal every day, every day. And in large part, that's because of the audience right here. Look, people in this audience right now are demanding transparency from our government, both on the executive branch and the legislative branch. That is historic, and they're responding. So I'm actually extremely optimistic. Now, what is that tipping point where there's more of us and less of them, meaning more of us who want disclosure and less of them who don't? We may already be there. I can't say for sure, but from where we were 7 years ago, um, we've got one hell of a proverbial army now, um, demanding the truth. Whereas before it was
Absolutely.
just a couple of voices and people that were being marginalized for being kooky and crazy. There was a time where from a national security perspective, you'd have to have been crazy to consider this topic legitimate. And now we're at the point where you'd be considered crazy not to, because the evidence is overwhelming.
Here's a fantastic question. Again, an amalgamation of lots. A couple more shout outs. We've got Cheetah Cat, we've got Scott Hanley, Eminem, Gerald, I see you, David Mills. Here's a good question. Lou, you recently said that you've probably spoken about 5% of what you know. In your mind, what needs to happen for you to be able to talk about what you know in full?
Well, hopefully, if we're successful, I never have to, and the government does it for me. It shouldn't be me. I should not be carrying the water. I should not be the single point of failure for disclosure. That's a problem. As much as people may like me, and I kind of hope I'm doing a good job for everybody. The reality is, I'm not the guy to carry this to the finish line. There's more people out there that are certainly more qualified than I am to do that. And so my hope is that we get to a point where the government will pick up this momentum for themselves and provide that information to the American people. I'm working every day to provide more and get approval to provide more information. But at the end of the day, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I could, and that can't stop. That can't stop what we're doing here. And this right now is the biggest. I think the biggest critical issue we're dealing with, that we can't just rely on a couple people out there to tell the truth. That is why we are in this situation in the first place. You had people like J. Allen Hynek back in the day telling the truth, and he got marginalized. And I tried to tell the truth, and they tried to marginalize me and Dave Grush. But this has to be more than that, more than just people like Chris Mellon and myself and the pilots. This has to be government officials, and we have to figure out a way. How do we do that without compromising any potential? Let me emphasize insights we may or may not have gleaned from this technology, because I'm okay acknowledging the fact that we're not alone and we have a lot of opportunity here, but I'm not okay revealing if there's been any type of insight to certain technologies. And, maybe we're using them for national security reasons to protect ourselves because we don't want our adversaries having that type of technology. Can you imagine some rogue nation having the capability to do something that frankly we can't? That's terrifying. So, it's a balance. It's not an all or nothing. I don't think. I think we have to continue doing what we're doing, where we've made tremendous progress together, all of us together in this conversation. We've got more distance to go in this marathon, but we've also come a hell of a long way, folks. I mean, just look how far we've come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The next question I'd like to throw your way is Daniel Maguire tuning in on YouTube. He says, Luis, do you think that your background and your education in immunology and microbiology have anything to do with your appointments to ATIP and NHI?
I don't think so. I could be wrong. You'd have to ask the people who hired me. Um, I don't think so. I think just having a scientific background helps us look at things from the principles of scientific methodology. I am a disciple of science. I've always said that. I'm not necessarily into mysticism, and people call me. It's funny when you look on Wikipedia. My Wikipedia page, by the way, for the record, was made by people who are they're skeptics, and they've admitted it. And so they put all sorts of crap in there that's not true. At one point, they think, maybe even still now, they call me a conspiracy theorist. Actually, on the contrary, I'm the exact opposite of a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe in conspiracies. I believe in facts. I believe in data. I believe in science. And in fact, a lot of people there that have taken control of my Wikipedia page aren't scientists at all. They're just skeptics, and they're kind of professional skeptics. That being said, I do think that my scientific background has helped me look at data objectively, look at the empirical evidence. Also, my background as a special agent, typically in the world of counterintelligence, we look at counterterrorism and counterespionage, capital crimes, national security crimes. And you have to be objective and you have to go where the evidence takes you. It has to be evidence based. It can't just be the way I feel. It can't be whimsical. It can't be based upon opinions or notions or narratives or whatever and innuendos. It has to be based on solid facts. And that is the way I pursued my efforts in ATIP, and my colleagues did the same thing.
I have a fantastic question. This is really good.
I'm a Gemini. I like long walks on the beach. I'm a. Is that what you're gonna ask me?
this one's from Cheetah Cat, and
Okay.
they ask: is there information that the US hides that is public knowledge in other countries? If so, would you kind of hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, want to tell us where we could look? And if there were, would
Yeah,
you
I don't
be
need
able
to
to
wink,
talk about
wink,
it?
nudge, nudge. Go to South America right now and go to some of these countries, big countries. Their presidents have already come out and said, "We know UAP are real. We investigate them all the time." But, congratulations, America, for finally catching up to the conversation. No, it's overt. There's actually an interview they had with one of the ex-presidents of a large Latin American country several years ago, where he's kind of baffled. He's like, "I don't even understand how this is even a question. We all know it's real. We've been studying it. We've been looking at it. We've got the evidence. Why are you still denying it, America?" Um, so great question, but I don't need to wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's out there. There's all sorts of information like that. There's lots of other countries that are, look. The reason why, just look at the evidence. There's a reason why Japan a couple years ago requested to enter specifically into a bilateral intelligence information sharing agreement with the United States for the sole purposes of sharing UAP information. Why would they do that unless they're having their own issues with it? They are.
Well, there we go. We've heard it. No winks or nudges needed. Let's go and have a look at South America. Here is another great question. This was predominantly Paul Gunn, who's just slamming this in the comments as well. So this is mainly out to Paul Gunn, but also out to kind of a few others who are asking about Trump's recent victory in the White House. He could be someone that might push for disclosure and transparency. What do you think the recent election result will do, and how will it affect your journey for disclosure,
Okay.
do you think?
So politics aside, I have never, ever, ever revealed my political affiliation. And I think it's important because my political affiliation doesn't mean anything to anybody. It's a personal choice. And this is true on both the Democrat and the Republican side, and even in the independent side and the libertarian side and constitutionalists. Um, what makes this topic so great? It is bipartisan. In fact, in some cases, it's even nonpartisan, meaning you have Democrats, Republicans, and everybody in between wanting truth and transparency and accountability. So, anytime you have a new administration, there's always opportunities for more revelations. And we've seen with this president formally, and now he's made several gestures where he wants to open up the JFK files, for example, which I think is a wonderful idea. He wants to open up the UFO files for the American people. I think that's a great idea. He's made those gestures very openly and publicly. And if you look at some of the people on his cabinet, whether you like them or dislike them or think they're crazy or that they're competent, doesn't matter. It just If you look at who they are, several of them have also postured very publicly their desire to give the American people the truth. So, and that's not just a Republican thing. There's lots of folks on the Democrat side that feel the same way. So I hate to make this a political discussion. I remain cautiously optimistic, as I did with the last administration and the administration before that, and the administration before that. I think all of them deserve a fair shake, just like Arrow deserves a fair shake. The new iteration of Arrow. Maybe under the last leadership, there were some mistakes that were done. Again, professionally. I don't want to attack anybody personally in their professional capacity. But I think we're seeing a signaling of by people in this new administration, and Arrow included, that maybe people are going to be a little more forthcoming this time. And I think that's great. I think it's fantastic.
Likewise, I think everyone in the comments section definitely seems to agree with that. So there's so many asking about Trump and about that. So hopefully that's settled a bunch of your questions there. Jumping over to William Ramsey, going to give you a shout out because William Ramsey has a pretty good question, which is to say,
Yeah.
Do you think that these UAPs, ETs, however you want to call them, do you get the sense that they are directing or slowing down disclosure? Do you think that this seems to be accelerating a little bit at the moment, or has this just always been happening? It's just we're recording it and communicating it better now.
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of times I've been asked, is the frequency increasing? Are they things becoming more obvious? Or is it just we have better collection capabilities now and more people with these little things, cell phones collecting information? And the answer may be both. We don't have enough data yet to definitively say one way or the other there's an increased frequency. Obviously, the more Arrow looks into this, the more unidentified objects they keep recording. But does it mean that there's really more objects? No, it could also mean that we're more sensitive. Maybe more people are reporting it. Maybe more people feel safe to report it. More commercial airline pilots and military pilots are coming forward. It's too early to tell. Now, is there any type of attempt by whatever these are to influence our own internal disclosure process? If that's the question, I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that it is influencing the UAP phenomena, is influencing our ability to have a conversation with ourselves. I think the challenge is with ourselves, not UAP. I think it's a topic that has been so fraught with so much stigma and taboo for so long that it's now very hard to have that conversation amongst ourselves. I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in the Army a long time ago, I'm an old guy. This is great, not blonde, so I'm an old guy. I often joke that Moses and myself were in basic training together. There was a time, and as silly as it seems, you were not allowed to be gay and be in the military. I get it. It sounds ridiculous. Why should I have that? Why should someone's sexual orientation have anything to do with your patriotism, right? And your loyalty to your country? It doesn't. And yet there was a time that if you were gay in the Army and people knew it, you'd be kicked out. You'd be kicked out. You'd lose your job or potentially even lose your security clearance. Now we've come complete 180, which is, thank God, it's about time, where no one cares if you're gay in the military, right? Who cares? It has nothing to do with anything. Um, but there was a long time where it was hard to have that conversation within the military complex, whether you were in the Army or the Marine Corps. It was very tough, and I saw a lot of good people lose their jobs simply because of who they were. And that was a hard conversation to have internally because if you appeared as being sympathetic to them, then they would look at you and you could lose your job. So it took time. And I think, this topic to some degree, again, from a stigma and taboo perspective, it's not really the same from other perspectives, but stigma and taboo, it took a long time to have that conversation with ourselves and be able to have a truthful conversation and explain to people that it's okay to have the conversation. We no one cares. We can have the conversation about UAP or gays in the military or anything else. Because at the end of the day, the truth is a truth, and it doesn't really affect your patriotism or your service to your country, or in this case, even national security, in my opinion, anyways.
I think you're spot on in the sense of pushing for communication, pushing for conversation and transparency is really the only
That's
way
it.
forward in all of those difficult
Right.
situations.
Take your issue du jour. It doesn't have to be, choose it.
Absolutely.
We have to have the conversation. We got to be open and
Mm.
honest with ourselves if we're going to evolve, beyond the troglodytes that we often, we often are.
Yeah, well, it brings to mind, like you say, when previous mistakes are made infrastructurally within governments, it doesn't mean that you have to throw out the government. Sometimes you just got to repair the broken wheel. You've got to fix that thing that was
That's
not
it.
quite right and move on. And it does
And
move.
here's the challenge with that, Mark, because you're right. We've it's like take it. I'm an auto mechanic guy, right? So I'm a gearhead. Imagine you have a broken water pump on a car, and most of the time you can take your car and take it to a repair shop and they'll fix it for you. Now, if you have a broken water pump, you don't throw the whole car out. You just replace the water pump, right? The problem is though that we're having to replace the water pump while we're driving 80 miles an hour down the highway. We can't stop the car. So it's a little more complicated, but that's kind of the analogy I like to use. Don't throw the car away. Don't leave it abandoned. Just replace what needs to be replaced, fix what needs fixing. We just don't have the luxury of being able to stop the vehicle to fix it. We got to figure out how to fix it while we're driving.
Well, as we're hanging out that window with a spanner trying to fix our water pump at 80 miles an hour on the highway, here's a question from Paul Rogers. And Paul Rogers on YouTube says, in a recent interview, you were asked if you knew something about an event happening in the near future. Now, you said yes, but you said it wasn't your story to tell. So I think he wants to explore this a little bit more. Did you find out during Pentagon work or after?
I no, it was while I was working with the U.S. government. I was told certain things, but you have to have evidence. Remember, empirical data has to drive decision making. It can't just be whims and ideas and thoughts and speculation.
And can I push you on the
Um,
certain things? When you said I was told certain things, can I push you on that? What was that?
um, uh, I'm going to take a pass on that right now, because the problem is that people have a tendency to hang on every word I say. And if I'm not sure of something, I don't want to say it. I think it's reckless to do that. I think it's irresponsible because we're just now having the conversation, and I don't have all the facts. And so for me to spew my opinion on something can actually cause more harm than good. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's constructive. I know people are curious, but at the end of the day, curiosity, I mean, doesn't necessarily mean anything, or my opinion on something isn't really that important. What's important is what does the data suggest? What do the facts say, right? And so I'm going to do a polite pass on that. I'm not trying to be evasive in any
Fine.
way. I don't want to do something that potentially is not accurate, puts us on the wrong path. Look, if people look on my social media, one of the very first things I say is, I will always tell you the truth, and I'll always accept accountability when I'm wrong. I will absolutely do it. I do it over and over again. Look, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time, and a little bit of humble pie is great for everybody. And believe me, I'm a connoisseur of humble pie. I can tell you all ways to make humble pie because I eat it routinely. Um, the goal in life is not to never make mistakes. The goal in life is when you make mistakes to learn from those mistakes, right? So those mistakes aren't repeated again. And so what I don't want to do is say something that I'm not 100% confident of, and then people run with that information. That would be negligent of me to do that. And so I'm going to hold my opinion for now on that.
Makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, here's another attempt to like coalesce a bunch of questions. Some of the usernames you lot have on YouTube are so ridiculous I can't say them out loud. But let's just assume that some of these questions have been augmented a bit. You've
Sure.
just come away from testifying in Congress. It's a big moment. There's many people on this team advocating for disclosure now. It's getting way past the point of dismissal. So here's a question, and it's sort of a little bit of a hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge question, but it's from Aquara, who says, does there happen to be a work of fiction or a film or a book that you feel resonates with topics that you like slash can't disclose?
You know, I have always told people, a friend of mine, Doug Johnson, several years ago, gave a copy of a book to Chris Mellon and myself called Chains of the Sea. And I can say now because he's given me permission to mention his name as being the guy who gave us a book. And I don't typically read fiction. It's just not my thing. Frankly, I don't have time for it. And so he said, "Look, I want you to pay attention to this second story in this series of novellas of three stories. Just read it." And out of courtesy for him, because he was kind enough to give me a copy, I did. And it is a really, again, it's a fiction, but it forces you to consider the phenomenon from a completely different perspective. It takes humans out of the driver's seat. In fact, it makes humans completely almost irrelevant in the calculus. And it really helped me look at things from a different perspective. Not that it's the right perspective, okay? So let me just emphasize that. It's fiction, but it helped me. It was a good exercise in allowing me to look at things in a way and say, okay, maybe we don't have a complete picture of nature, of our universe and our place in the universe. I thought it was very well done. It's maybe 40, 50 pages long, a little, maybe less. It's really small, but it was done very clever. It was done in a very clever way, very cleverly. And so I would encourage anybody, if you wanted to read something interesting, maybe an hour read and just kind of consider this topic from a different perspective, that's a good place to start. Again, don't read it as like, oh, Lou's saying this is true. That's not what I'm saying. It's a way to look at a topic that you're used to looking at in a certain way, and having coming away with a completely different perspective or view. And that's what I appreciate about it. It's what we call in the intelligence community alternative analysis. It's a competing viewpoint, and I like that. It's called Chains of the Sea, by the way.
There's a couple of people already making comments saying, I've got Ace Corv saying Chains of the Sea is a scary book. I've got Grelch saying Chains of the Sea is very good. Good luck finding it though. Apparently, it's a tough book to find. But as
I made
as
the mistake by talking about it, and then all of a sudden, the book that was like $7 became like $800 instantly over, on eBay. So, I apologize for anybody out there. I think there are some free. I don't know, maybe not. I think there's some free versions that you can download. I'm not encouraging anybody to pirate anything, but I do think there may be some. I did see a PDF out there on it, and it's the second of the three novellas in that series called Chains of the Sea. And I apologize if now the book is on 10, you can't reach it. And, that wasn't my intent. I have no financial stake in the book. Um, I did find it just very interesting. So I'm sorry it's hard to find. Maybe, you know what? Maybe they'll republish the darn thing now.
quite possibly, I imagine with you talking about it, it's very very likely. I'm realizing that we're coming up to our hour, Lou, and there are so many questions. I just have to say to
This is why
everyone
we have
in
to
the
keep doing this, Mark. We've
yep.
got to do it till we answer every one of them.
Absolutely. And I promise you, for everyone tuning in right now who is not getting a question asked, just do me a quick favor as we come up to this hour. Go to Lou's website, Luis Elizondo official.com, and please make sure you subscribe to that mailing list. We're going to be taking questions through that mailing list when it comes to live events, speaking engagements, when it comes to doing things like this, speaking to you through live streams. It's a really, really good place to get notifications on it. And I'm really pressed to choose the last questions here.
Mark, let's do more than one. I know we're coming up to our. I'll see if I can speak fast. My wife came in here and kind of kicking my shin, saying I'm talking too long, and I got to answer more people's questions. So let me see if I can do a quick rapid fire here.
Oh, it's just some of these questions are not necessarily rapid fire questions. Let me just get straight to it. Let me have a look at this one. Here, right. I think it was Nancy Mace, wasn't it, head of the committee on Wednesday. She said something along these lines: if taxpayers' money is spent on this and it doesn't exist, then where the hell's the money going? And if it does exist, why can't the taxpayer know what's being discovered with their dollars? What do you think about that?
I think she's absolutely right. Look, I mean, she's a tough individual. I mean, look, if you ever have a chance to meet some of these folks in Congress, they are no nonsense. I mean, they will hit you right between the eyes. And all the questions that were asked, I think, were very relevant. She pulls no punches, and if she doesn't like what you have to say, she's going to let you know. I thought it was fantastic. I love when she puts us on the hot seat because that's exactly what America deserves. That's what Congress deserves. It doesn't feel good being the person there under oath, being in the hot seat. But I was so happy and so proud of my country for having the guts to do it. Right. So even though it made me uncomfortable personally, it gave me this wonderful sense of patriotism and pride saying, man, this is exactly what you need to do. Don't let up, keep asking us the hard questions. Um, I think she's absolutely correct. I think she's 1,000% correct. We have to have accountability, and to have accountability, you have to have transparency. Full stop.
Absolutely. Here's one from someone who goes under the name Cosmic Files, who says, have you seen any photographs or footage up close showing occupants of a UAP?
I have seen photographs that seem to portray something inside. I am not going to go too far beyond that because, again, you need better fidelity of information. If I look at something, there's a phenomenon that is with the human being that we happen to see faces a lot. It is because as children and babies, the very first thing we do is we are, as a species, we are trained to recognize the features of our mother and understand what safe is. And we are always recognizing faces. How we know each other. I know you, Mark, and you know me because my face, the way I look. And it's kind of a innate part of being human. And that's why people, a lot of times, when they look at clouds, they see faces and figures because it's something that is the brain is automatically overlaying to recognize, even though there's not really a face up there. You look at a popcorn ceiling and you can see faces. And so um, we have to be careful with that because understanding that we are predisposed to see things that we recognize, we have to avoid the temptation then of saying definitively, yes, that is what I saw. It may look like it, but it could also potentially be something else. You know, it's like those pictures that you see a lot of times, the black and white pictures, it's just ink. And people, what do you see? Well, I see, you know, two faces together. What do you see? Well, I see a chalice. It depends who you ask what you see. And so I'm very careful of that because I know biologically, as biological animals, it's part of our wiring to do that. And so we have to kind of force ourselves to try not to be that way at first, even though that's the very first thing we recognize. We have to try to avoid that temptation as much as possible.
The the way that I'll round this up is a couple more shout outs just to get some names. Artificially amusing, we see you, Ross Clark, Andre Salzman, to Pacabra. There's so many, Gerald Dishiara. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing these right, but just so many people tuning in. Now, here's one from someone who goes under the name Our Lady of Beasts. It's not even a question. It's just something that she's begging me to tell you, and it is.
She's a great lady, by the way. She's done a lot for this effort. I'm not gonna say who she is, but she's done tremendous work behind the scenes.
Well, what a beautiful place to close, because I wasn't aware that you would know the person on this handle. But
Yeah.
they say, please tell Lou to rest up and take care of himself.
Is it that obvious?
You've been you've been doing this.
I'm sorry. I know. I know. It's terrible. Look, I don't have any foundation on. I forgot my lipstick. It's. I feel like I've been run over by a freight train. I am sorry. Unfortunately, what you see is what you get. Let's just say it's a bad hair day for me. I just got off of a plane, a few hours ago, tried to grab a little bit of sleep, and here I am again. You're right. I need beauty rest. In fact, I need a lot of a lot of beauty rest. And I'm sorry it's so painfully evident, but hopefully in the next month, during the holiday season, I'll get a chance to rest up a little bit and maybe look a little more fresh.
Well,
It has
I'm
been.
certain from her perspective she wasn't passing judgment on your looks, but
No, I know she wasn't. No, no,
what
no. But
she
you gotta
what she
make fun of things, right? No, no. She's a great person.
great.
I'm
Well, what
just
she probably meant was to say, you have been running 1,000 miles an hour recently in the last couple of months, with everything from testifying in Congress to the books, all the things you've been working on, the press tours, the interviews.
yeah.
You're hopefully you are going to be able to take a rest in December. And I would like to close by asking you, Lou, if you get this time to breathe, to rest a little bit. I know you have your last speaking engagements. I know you have a few tour dates that you have to finish. But what does 2025 look like for you in an ideal world?
Wow. Well, a lot of people who know me know I'm a bit like a shark. That if I stop swimming, I'll die. I've got to keep pressing forward until I don't have to anymore. Um, I think 2025 is full of opportunity, um, just like 2024 was. I think if people have learned anything by now, when I say the following year is going to be more revelatory, I think that's true. Every year has been more revelatory, more legislation, more hearings, more truth is coming forward. More people now are in the fight, and more support both in the executive branch and the legislative branch. Um, and this is whether you hate me or love me, because as you know, I got my fair share of haters, and I'm sure you have to deal with that quite a bit as well. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And whether you hate me or love me, I mean, can we agree that at least we want the truth together? You know, afterward, if you want to throw tomatoes at me, fine, and continue to hate. But can we at least kind of agree that truth ultimately is the most important thing? And we can maybe agree on that and work together in that direction. I would certainly hope so. But you know, that's not just my decision. It has someone else. Other people have to be part of that decision as well, and agree to that. That's what we want to do together. I personally believe all ships rise with the tide. But maybe I'm just optimistic. I tend to be an optimist.
I've got a funny feeling your optimism is going to pay off. It's got you very far, and like you say, when we started this chat, the tenacity of it to keep pushing forward is the only thing we can do. Lou, I know from your behalf, I'm going to put some words in your mouth here, but I think that we want to say a huge thank you for everyone tuning in on the
Yeah.
live. There are so many people we couldn't possibly shout them out. My
Mark, let me address
apologies.
something very important,
Go
if I can.
ahead.
I
Go
hate
ahead.
to interrupt you, but this is
Sure.
important. I know people need to jump off. Look, we're talking about social media. We're talking about trying to work together. We all have a responsibility to work together. I just want to say that nobody speaks on my behalf when it comes to social media. It's me. I do not tolerate abuse. I don't like it. And if and when people speak on my behalf and the tone of that is not professional, I will deal with it. And I just want to make sure people know I'm not deaf to things. There's a right way and a wrong way to handle things. I try to handle things right, and I'm going to continue doing that. And if people, either the haters or even the people that support me, if they're doing something that's wrong, I want to make sure that people know that I don't condone it, and I will address it. I may not handle it the way that people like me to handle it, but I'll handle it, and I'll handle it privately, and it will be effective. So I just wanted to put that out there because social media should be a tool used to bring people together and not divide people. And sometimes people's emotions get the best of them, and it's used to divide, and it's not helpful. So I just wanted to put that out there real quick.
Love that. And it's a fantastic message to end on. Lou, thanks as always for taking the time to do this. And to everyone tuning in, we will see you on the next one. Keep a lookout, get on that website, get on the socials, and we'll see you when we see you next.
Thank you,
Adios.
folks. Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
All right. So give us a few seconds. Lou, whilst you're with me, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to. So
What do
we
you
are
think of
we
that? Was that okay?
yeah, we are now offline. All I'm going to do is just to triple check here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody was happy because I don't want anybody. I know people get frustrated if their questions don't get answered. And I want to make sure everybody knows I am going to answer them as time permits.
Yeah, you know what? We got through tons of them. Okay, so bear with me because you know what this